You know you can't go on like this, so don't. Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
They should have never shut down the government over DACA. We should have never held our American people and our military hostage.
In my judgment, it was the worst piece of legislation I have voted on since I've been in the United States Congress, and there's not another bill that's a close second.
There is a credible case of obstruction of justice against Donald Trump.
If you're serious about impeaching a president, it cannot and should not be done on a partisan basis.
The president has misled the American people about how big a problem chain migration is. I would rather see us focus on the millions of people that are legally waiting in line right now.
Democratic leadership, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, really have no clear message. We have been confused. I think at the end of the day, they've been using us as pawns. But at this point, I'm quite frustrated with the Democratic leadership, what they've done.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to this brand new edition of Focal Point on the American Family Radio Talk Network. For American Family Radio Network, to keep it simple. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio, and I am your congenial, convivial, and amiable as well as effervescent host. Good to have you in the conversation. Want to jump right into the Word of God. As I've explained before, the Word of God is represent our nautical charts as we navigate our way through our culture and identify those strongholds that need to be torn down in order that those that are trapped behind those strongholds may be set free and be able to come in to the knowledge of God. We are in the book of Job, a long book, 42 chapters, dealing with the problem of evil. Why is it that bad things happen to good people? And what we see in the book of Job is that bad things can happen to good people, and it's not their fault. It's not the fault of the people, the good people. It's not their fault that bad things happen to them. Sometimes bad things can happen because of acts of nature. Sometimes bad things can happen to people because of the evil that men do. And other times it's just God's sovereign hand allowing events to transpire, allowing, as in Job's case, allowing warriors to come in and besiege him, allowing acts of God. Strong wind collapsed a house on top of his children. All 10 of them died. And God's sovereign hand was on that. Declared that he had a plan for that, a purpose for that, and he allowed it. So bad things can happen to good people for a lot of reasons, including the fact that God may have some larger purpose for that he never even reveals. Job never did find out what God's big picture was for what was happening to him. Now, in chapters 18 and 19, and there's a point we want to get to at the end of this study, which I think is a very, very important element because it gives us our ultimate hope when we're in a time of suffering. Where is our ultimate hope found? And the answer is found in what Job tells us here. Now, the friends of Job were warning him about his ultimate destination in chapter 18. They were warning him about how his life was going to turn out. He was going to be taken to the king of terrors. He was going to have sulfur scattered over his habitation. The roots were going to dry up beneath him. The branches were going to wither above him. Everybody was going to forget about him after he was gone. Nobody was going to miss you. Your memory will perish from the earth. You will have no name in the street. You're not going to leave behind any children. And all this his friends were telling him because you stubbornly refuse to admit that all this is your fault, that you have secret, unconfessed sin in your life, and that's the reason all these terrible things are happening. In the beginning of chapter 19, Job begins to complain. He calls for help, and no one answers. This leaves him in torment, he says. He indicates that God has hemmed him in, blocked his way, He doesn't know how to proceed. He's a broken man, he says, on every side. Whatever hope I had has been uprooted like a tree that's been ripped out of the ground. He feels besieged by God, abandoned and rejected by his closest friends, his intimate friends, his relatives, his house guests, his servants, his own wife, his brothers and sisters, and even kids in the neighborhood despise him. That's how bad things had got. And apparently, according to verse 20, he had lost a tremendous amount of weight. You could see the bones through his skin. So Job says, what I want to do is I want to leave behind some kind of permanent written record to tell my side of the story so that after I'm gone, perhaps this written record can help to vindicate me. That's why he says, oh, that my words were written, that they were inscribed in a book. Well, he got that wish because we're reading it here. Oh, that with an iron pen and lead they were engraved on the rock forever. Now, there was one truth in all of this that steadied him, that stabilized him, that even if he was never to be vindicated in the eye of anyone, in the eye of any man, even if his reputation would never be restored, and it's a hope that he has that extends beyond the grave. It's the hope, the confidence that Job has that God will see and God will finally set things right. He says in verse 26, after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. So he says, look, after my skin is destroyed, he's referring to his own death. That is, after my death, yet in my flesh, literally the Hebrew says, from my flesh I will see God. He will see God, he says, from his flesh, from his body. This is the new body that we're all going to get when the resurrection takes place. So he will be in his new body. He will be standing in his own body, his new body, and from that vantage point, being inside his own body, he will see God. He says, I will see him for myself. My eyes in my new resurrection body shall behold him and not another. So that's got to be what he's talking about, because it says this is after his skin is destroyed. So here's one of the Old Testament hints of the resurrection to come, and that the resurrection will give us a new body, a resurrection body, a brand new incorruptible body that's promised to everybody who dies, believing as Job did in the Redeemer. He says, I know that my Redeemer lives. So this is one of the casual glimpses that we get, or the occasional glimpses we get in the Old Testament about the age to come, that there is a resurrection from the dead, and we get a glimpse into what follows. Every once in a while, a curtain is pulled back, and we get a peek into what's on the other side of death, and that's what Job allows us to see here. Now, his confidence as he faces his own death is that there is a Redeemer. He says, I know that my Redeemer lives. Now, the word Redeemer refers to one literally who acts as a kinsman. Now, the oldest male relative was responsible to pursue justice and payback for members of his family. Now, in an execution, what this would mean, if we were going to do this today, the one who pushes the plunger, the one who throws the switch, the one who gives the command to fire, if it's a shooting squad, the firing squad, the one who avenges, the one who will reclaim as his own, who will avenge, it's a justice word, the word vengeance. He is the one who will put everything right. This would be the oldest male relative in the family, would be the one to make the decisive act that brought about justice. Even though the verdict would be rendered by the state, justice could be carried out if we were going to imitate what we learn in the Scriptures. So anyway, Job knows that the Redeemer, my Redeemer lives. He is the one that is going to achieve justice for me. He's going to return to me everything that has been taken from me. So the Redeemer, when he comes, will reclaim for us everything that the world, the flesh, and the devil has taken from us. Our enemies may have stripped us of everything we own in this life, but our Redeemer will reclaim it all and return it to us in full. Well, let's pray. This is a prayer for someone whose family and friends have abandoned him in a time of trouble. Sovereign Lord, I accept what you teach in your word about the wicked, that his light will be put out, that his strong steps will be shortened and his own schemes will throw him down. And so, Lord, I seek to be righteous before you and walk in your ways. Lord, darkness is broken upon my paths. My friends torment me and break me into pieces. And even though it seems as though you have put my brothers far from me, and that those who know me are wholly estranged from me, I place my hope and my trust in you as my living Redeemer.
Every day in the red light districts of Mumbai, India, there are children as young as 8 being trafficked and exploited. And it isn't just young girls they're looking for. Some men are looking for young boys. This cannot go on any longer. Team up with American Family Radio and India Partners. With your gift of just $7.08, you provide a day of safety and shelter at a new India Partners safe house far away from the city. That $7.08 means school, shelter, meals, and the love of Jesus. Coming up here on American Family Radio, we're going to address the issue of child trafficking, but we aren't going to do it in a way that is graphic or unsafe for your children to hear. But we will tell you now that we're going to address a topic that could, for some, be uncomfortable. We hope you'll listen and team up with American Family Radio and India Partners to provide hope for a new safe house for boys in the red light district. Get more information at afr.net.
Nothing is covered up that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. The House Intelligence Committee's FISA memo and Senator Chuck Grassley's memo referring Christopher Steele to the FBI for a criminal investigation revealed that the FBI knowingly used Steele's trash dossier to secure search warrants to spy on American citizens. We also know the Clinton campaign and the DNC not only paid for the dossier's creation, the Clintons actually fed false information to Steele via the State Department to be included in the dossier. The greatest threat to the American Republic is not external. It is internal implosion.
Listen to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Central on AFR. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, welcome back to this brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. You know, great words from Job at the end of chapter 19. Even though his heart is faint within him, he was determined to cling in faith to God in the confidence and conviction that his Redeemer was alive, and that at the end, at the last, the Redeemer would stand upon the earth. So he knew that the day would come when he would see his Redeemer for himself with his own eyes, and his appeal to this judge for mercy would be answered. Now, as you're aware, we're in a 2-week stretch where we are encouraging you to become a financial partner with India Partners. And I want to give you an update. We've had 330 donations so far, 5,538 days of safety, care, and rescue for these children in the red light district in Mumbai, India. You know, this year, the gifts in particular are targeted to complete the building of a safe house for boys. Last year, the big project was a safe house for girls. That was completed. Now there are boys that get caught up in the sex trafficking thing. They can be the sons of prostitutes that are involved in the red light district there in Mumbai. So the boys need attention just as much as the girls do. And we want to play the testimony of one boy. His name is Najesh. He's 14 years old, and he describes his experience.
I remember the day my mom passed away. She had been sick, so the men had stopped coming by. She was lying in bed, and I went to make her some hot milk. But when I came back from the kitchen, she was gone. When I lost my mom, I was so heartbroken. I had nowhere to go, and I just couldn't stop crying. This nice woman heard about what had happened, and 3 days after my mom died, I came here. The first morning I woke up here, I could smell breakfast cooking. I got my own toothbrush, and it felt like I was in a real home, and a proper home. Before I came here, I hardly knew anything about Jesus. But now Jesus has come into my life. He helps me do my studies, and he gives me a lot of protection. Every day, I'm learning about Jesus.
So the number to call if you'd like to make a donation is 877-616-2396. Grab your credit card, pull it out, give this number a call, 877-616-2396. You can also give online at afr.net. And don't forget, you can provide a day of safety care and rescue for $7.08. $50 will provide a week's worth of safety care and rescue. $100 provides 2 weeks. And $212 will provide an entire month of safety, care, and rescue for a boy just like Najesh. You heard his story about his reaction when his mom died. Just 3 days later, he was taken into one of these safe houses, received medical care, counseling, started in on an education, really changed and saved his life. $640, that'll provide 3 months of safety care and rescue for a child like Najesh. $2,560 provide an entire year. So again, the funds this year are going to be focused on completing, purchasing, expanding, and the ongoing work on a new boys' safe house. No one should be bought, sold, or even exposed to living in a red light district. Your gift, call 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396, or you can give online at afr.net. Now, a couple of quick words on economic front and the budget front. You know, remember, we played that soundbite from Mick Mulvaney where he said, look, the figures in this budget, these are not floors, they're ceilings. Congress doesn't have to spend all of this money. But he says if they do, and we expect that they will, then we're prepared to do this, that, and the other thing. Now, apparently, Donald Trump was going to try to help them not to spend everything that's been designated in the budget. And by the way, the tax cuts that he instituted are already making a difference, increasing federal revenue. Now, remember, the myth out there is that if you cut taxes, you are cutting revenue to the government, that is an income reduction for the government. You cut taxes, it means less money to the federal government. It turns out it's the other way around. When you cut taxes, it stimulates the economy, more money circulates in the economy, and what is collected? More taxes are collected. And here's the reality. According to the monthly Treasury statement released this week, the federal government just raked in more in taxes in the first 4 months of the fiscal year, which started back on October 1, than in any other year. More money in the first 4 months came in than in any other year during these first 4 months. And the January record for tax collections was busted, and the Treasury ran a surplus in January. Not a deficit, but a $49 billion surplus. And this is after the tax cuts went into effect. That, remember, the liberals always say, how are we going to pay for the tax cut? How are we going to pay for it? We're cutting taxes, less revenue to the federal government. Well, $49 billion surplus as a result of the tax cuts. You know, we've got a record number of U.S. small business owners out there saying that this is a great time to expand. They are optimistic. Optimism rose more than was expected in January, fueled by a record number of small business owners that believe now is a good time to expand. That's according to the National Federation of Independent Business Owners. A survey was released on Tuesday. 32% said it's a good time to expand. This is ahead of all monthly figures clear back to 1986 and quarterly readings back to 1973. 41% of small business owners expect the economy to improve. You know, we've talked about the filibuster here. Now, even when the Republicans have the filibuster, they're not able to use it. The Democrats are the only ones that use it to stymie the Republicans. When the Republicans had it, they never used it to stop the Democrats. They're just pathetic. but the Democrats know how to use it. They know how to cob up the Republicans, and they've managed to do that on immigration and other issues. Now, Donald Trump is cutting some other things that I think are good. He's cut $30 million from the Great Lakes Restoration Fund, $3 billion in total proposed trims to the EPA's budget. A lot of these are boondoggle projects. They just wind up going into union pockets. They wind up going into bureaucrats' pockets. They wind up going into government pockets. And so Donald Trump is going to make them spend their money wisely. $3 million cut in the $300 million fund for the restoration of the Great Lakes. And I'm sure not that there isn't a need for it, not that the Great Lakes couldn't use it, but Donald Trump's estimation doesn't need $300 million. Now, Trump, in his budget proposal that came out today, he intends to reduce entitlement programs by $1.7 trillion over the next decade. Remember, everybody talks about reducing entitlement programs. Nobody does anything about it. Donald Trump is proposing a $1.7 trillion reduction in entitlement programs over the next decade. And he wants to reduce the non-defense discretionary budget by 2% annually. Remember, if you reduce the federal budget by 2% a year across the board, you will get a balanced budget in about 6 or 7 years. So he's going to start in on the discretionary non-defense budget, get that thing under control. He intends to cut Medicare spending by $237 billion. He's estimating that he's going to be able to cut the $20.6 trillion deficit by $3 trillion over the next decade. Now, that sounds pretty ambitious to me. We'll have to see how that works out, because he's got some pretty ambitious spending plans. $200 billion for infrastructure. He wants $18 billion for the border wall. He wants $85 billion for spending on education, healthcare, vocational rehab for veterans. He wants $716 billion for national defense. He's got major improvements to immigration enforcement, 2,750 new Border Patrol and immigration officers. Price tag is $782 million. Wants $13 billion to fight the opioid epidemic. Going to give the Department of Health and Human Services a $3 billion pay bump next year and a $10 billion pay bump in 2019. But apparently he sees some way that all that is going to work out. Now, here are just some of the agencies that Trump is planning to eliminate. Most of these, I did not even know that they existed. You've got the McGovern-Dole International Food for Education. This is donating agricultural commodities to carry out school feeding programs in foreign countries. The Rural Business and Cooperative Service, loans, grants, and payments to increase opportunities in rural communities. Let's see what else is going to be cut. Gaining early awareness and readiness for undergraduate programs. Grants to support college preparation. Well, that's what school is for, college preparation. The Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, as if we don't have enough healthcare research going on in America. The Advanced Research Projects Agency. I mean, who knows what flies under the Advanced Research moniker? That's for the Energy Department. We can do away with that. National Wildlife Refuge Fund compensates communities for lost tax revenue when the federal government acquires their land. What's the answer to that? Stop the federal government from acquiring our land. Then you don't have to pay anybody anything. And they put the land to productive use. The Global Climate Change Initiative, don't need to spend any money on that because we are out of that Paris Climate Agreement. The NASA Office of Education provides grants to colleges and universities, museums, and science centers. The funding will be redirected within NASA because I believe, I'm in agreement with those that believe we need to boost our space program, not because it's fun, not because it's a frill, but for national defense purposes. We need to be able to control the heavens and defend ourselves from the heavens if we are going to be a free people in this coming century. Chemical Safety Board, tasked with investigating accidents at chemical facilities. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, going to zero out funds for public television. radio stations, NPR. Donald Trump going right after Big Bird, just about time. They could easily stand on their own. I don't know how much money they get selling Big Bird stuff and Oscar the Grouch stuff and trash cans and all that kind of stuff. And the little guys that stand up in the opera box and holler insults at everybody, they make a ton of money. They are perfectly able to subsist on their own. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Be right back.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Most Americans were startled, to say the least, when news broke that Rob Porter, the president's White House staff secretary, had resigned amid allegations of serious domestic abuse by 2 ex-wives. Before we get lost in the crossfire of political machinations and questions of what did Chief of Staff Kelly know and when did he know it, we need to talk about the serious problem of domestic spousal abuse in America. By all accounts, Mr. Porter was the model of what most parents and most women would call a catch. The 40-year-old Porter, Harvard Law grad and Rhodes Scholar, with tall, clean-cut movie star good looks, fits a recruiter poster model for much of corporate culture. The people around him were shocked to hear of the heinous actions of which his ex-wives accuse him. This is precisely why domestic violence is so widespread in America. It is most often a secret crime committed in private by respectable pillars of society. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, 1 out of 4 women and 1 out of 9 men are victims of intimate partner violence in their lifetimes. Domestic violence is a scourge in our society, and it is increasing rather than decreasing. And unless it is addressed and the abuser gets help, it will almost certainly continue, and it will almost always escalate into greater acts of violence. We must encourage those who are victimized to come forward. We should take their allegations seriously, and we should encourage all victims to remove themselves and their children from physical danger immediately, helping them to find alternative living arrangements when necessary. What about the accused? I would say if you're guilty, get professional help immediately. Without it, you will be a repeat offender. If you're innocent, take a polygraph test. The results of such tests are often not admissible in a court of law, but they are very persuasive in the court of public opinion. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net. afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Jeff was saying on the break, what we could do is we could get those grumpy guys from Sesame Street, the 2 guys that are up there in the opera box just hurling insults at everybody. We could get those 2 guys. We could put one in his seat, the other one in mine, and nobody would know the difference. Listen to Focal Point, they wouldn't have any idea that there had been any change in the personnel.
I think he said my seat, though.
Rob's seat? Oh, so I'm in other words, he's a compliment to, I'm the adult in
You're the adult
room.
in the room, yeah. So, and the rest of us are grumpy old men.
Yeah. So, anyway, a couple of the other agencies and programs that Donald Trump intends to defund, and ladies and gentlemen, this is good stuff. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, we've been trying to defund this thing for decades. Whether he can get it done or not, I don't know. Again, you know what's going to stop this thing from being defunded? That cotton-picking fake-a-buster. Because there's no way in the world you're going to get the Democrats to defund Big Bird, even though Big Bird is perfectly able to stand on his own 2 feet. What they make in revenue off of sale of products and all that merchandise, they could easily stand on their own 2 feet. So the faker-buster will probably make it impossible to defund that. The Legal Services Corporation, this is a nonprofit, provides legal assistance for low-income individuals. You have, in every community, you have public defenders that are paid for by the taxpayers in that community. So we don't need a whole Legal Services Corporation. What it does, it just invites, if you have government-funded lawyers that exist to do nothing but file lawsuits for low-income people, then you get lawsuits filed, frivolous lawsuits, lawsuits that are filed just because somebody has an opportunity to make some money from the public treasury by taking some corporation or some agency to court. It's just something that is a magnet for frivolous and unnecessary lawsuits. National Endowment for the Arts is scheduled to be defunded. This funds American artists. You ever seen the stuff that they produce with these grants for the National Endowment for the Arts? We don't need that. You have, we always used to have in America philanthropists, those that made money hand over fist. They had a lot of money. They would serve as patrons of the arts. So they would provide funding for operas. They would provide funding for symphonies. They would provide funding for artists. And America got along just fine. Nobody has a problem with having a fund for the arts. The problem is when our money is taken at gunpoint from our wallets and given to these programs. That we object to. We have no problem with people giving their own money to that, and we're happy to see them do it. That's how you get libraries. The libraries were funded by the Carnegie Mellon folks for years. In fact, we had a couple of libraries in my hometown of Boise, one in Nampa, and they were Carnegie Mellon libraries. The money for those libraries came from Carnegie or Mellon, one of those two people, or both of them together, with some kind of nonprofit philanthropy that they had developed. So the National Endowment for the Humanities gives grants to American humanities scholars. We can do without that. All of those are beyond the proper role of the government. Remember, the role of government, according to Scripture, the proper role of government is two things. It's justice, well, three things really. It's justice, it is national security or national defense, and it's enforcing contracts. And that is it. When you want justice, somebody deprives you of one of your constitutional rights to life or to liberty or to property, somebody needs to secure justice. That's the role of government, so we don't wind up with everybody taking justice into their own hands. That's vigilante justice. That just leads to chaos, civil anarchy, complete breakdown. We don't want that. So that's what government is for, to secure justice. Now we need a national defense. We need to protect ourselves from our enemies, not only domestic, but also foreign. That's what government is for. They can be out there keeping our country safe so we can go about the business of raising our families, going to work, going to Bible study, going to choir practice, and all the things that we do that make life pleasurable and enjoyable. And then the third thing is enforcement of contracts. Now, did you make a contract with somebody, some kind of a business agreement? What happens if the other guy reneges on that contract? He just walks out on it and leaves you holding the bag. Well, somebody has got to hold him accountable for breaking the lease or breaking the contract without having a valid reason to do it. That's what government is for, to enforce contracts. You got to have that. You need that. And that's all we need government for. We don't need government to be building things and making things. We just need government to enforce justice, protect our national defense, enforce contracts, and other than that, just to stay the heck out of the way. Now, one of the things that Donald Trump is doing that I think is brilliant is he's proposing a change in the food stamp program, and a lot of people are complaining about this, but what Donald Trump is proposing is that we replace some food stamp grants with actual food. Now, this outrages liberals. You know why liberals are outraged at this? They ought to be happy about this, because you can make sure that people who benefit from the food program get healthy food to eat. Now, why are liberals outraged? Because what they want is they want a redistribution of wealth. They don't want a redistribution of food. They want a redistribution of wealth. They want to see money changing hands, money being transferred from the haves to the have-nots. So they are just completely ticked off at this very idea. But it's a brilliant idea. Under the program, the SNAP recipients would use some of the ability, maybe even a lot of the ability, to choose the food they buy with their own SNAP benefits. Low-income Americans under the proposal who receive at least $90 a month, that's about 80% of all SNAP recipients, would get about half of their benefits in the form of a USDA foods package. This would consist of shelf-stable milk, ready-to-eat cereals, pasta, peanut butter, beans, and canned fruit and vegetables. Now, this is something that all food banks do. We ran a food bank at my church, as a lot of churches do. And what the individuals that ran our food bank did is they would make sure we'd get these boxes, and they would make sure that these boxes were packed with staples so that a family came and they needed help, we could give them a box full of food that would feed their family for X period of time, and the things that would be in there would be shelf-stable. They would be stable food items that they could use in turn to feed their families. So there's still going to be money that'll be left over on their food stamp cards to buy other things, but this is a way to make sure that people get good, solid, nutritional food. You know, and they're just outraged that people are making these choices for them. It's going to stigmatize them if these choices are made for them. But notice these people didn't care about depriving people of choice when it came to Obamacare. They were perfectly happy to take away our choices then without worrying about stigmatizing or anything else. When it comes to gun control, they could care less about depriving people of choice. When it comes to raising taxes, they could care less about depriving people of their choice about spending their own money. They didn't even care when Michelle Obama tried to deprive school children and schools of choice by telling schools what they should be serving in their cafeterias. And of course, what happened is food got dumped by the truckload. So anyway, that I think is I think it's a very, very good idea to have that kind of change in the food program, the welfare program, to feed the hungry. I think it is a great, great idea. Now let's shift gears just a little bit. Let's see if I have anything else on this topic I want to get to. I can save that for later. This is an interesting story because it's in juxtaposition to what we've seen in the White House. Remember, we've had this Rob Porter, who in my mind is credibly accused of domestic abuse. I am with those that believe that the accusations by his ex-wives is credible. We've got pictures, we have police reports, and so forth. So I find those accounts credible. I agree with Donald Trump. Everybody deserves the presumption of innocence. They deserve due process. That even counts in the court of public opinion. That's something that Roy Moore never got, because if you give him due process, I mean, the accusers, their stories, every one of them completely fell apart on closer examination, but nobody gave Roy Moore due process. The media didn't. They rushed to judgment. He was tarred and feathered. He was demonized before he ever had a chance to even begin defending himself. But here's a story, and it has to do with a Democratic donor, so you haven't heard anything about it. You know, they are up in arms that you've got these Republicans in the White House, this Rob Porter guy that's abusing his wives. You have these other Republicans that are credibly charged or accused of domestic abuse or sexual harassment. They want them to be taken to the nearest guillotine. Now listen to this story. This has to do with a Democratic donor by the name of Ed Buck. And there was a male escort that was found dead in his home. Now he is a high-powered Democratic Party donor. Now this male escort, that's a gay male prostitute, was found dead in his home last year. And the media, the national media, has given this thing no attention whatsoever. You know, when this happens in the home of a Republican donor, why, it's a scandal that fits on the front page of every newspaper in the country. The victim here is a guy by the name of Gemmel Moore, 26. He was discovered by police last July 27th inside the apartment of Ed Buck. He's a well-known Democratic contributor. He's given more than $500,000 to an entire array of Democrats: Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, Los Angeles County District Attorney Jackie Lacey, and a whole variety of local and state Democrat organizations in California. Now, authorities have ruled the death an accidental methamphetamine overdose, but the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office Homicide Bureau announced that they are going to investigate to see if there's any criminal culpability, because his friends and family are disputing this early finding of an accidental death. According to the July 31st coroner's report, Buck's apartment was riddled with drug paraphernalia. Among the items found were 24 syringes containing brown residue, 5 glass pipes with white residue and burn marks, a plastic straw with possible white residue, clear plastic bags with white powdery residue, and a clear plastic bag containing a piece of crystal-like substance. The investigators spoke with a woman who said Moore told her, the guy that was the victim, told her that someone whose name was redacted, maybe this Kinbuck guy, tied him up and held him against his will at the residence in Hollywood. There are other reports that he made a habit out of enticing young black males to his apartment to give him drugs.
We care about justice
and aren't afraid to ask hard questions.
In fact, we care about a lot of things. We have passion for truth.
We are EngageMagazine.net, an online group of millennials brought together by a common goal to share truth, apply scripture, and to get involved in our lost and hurting world. EngageMagazine.net hosts discussions that help you apply a biblical worldview to your daily life. EngageMagazine.net.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
Here on American Family Radio, this is David Wolin with Haven Ministries, inviting you to anchor your day in God's Word. I love a good book, always have, but there was a time in my life when I lacked the discipline to put the book down when I needed to. I'd often stay up reading for hours into the night. Eventually, I had to admit my habit had become unhealthy. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Reading? Unhealthy? But anytime something good becomes something ultimate in our hearts, it's a problem. Sometimes with practical implications, like waking up tired, but there are spiritual implications too, because only Jesus deserves our ultimate affections, and He's the only one who can satisfy the deepest longings of our hearts. As Jesus said, "I have come that they may have life, and have it to the full." Anchor Devotional can help you keep your eyes on Jesus. Visit getanchor.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. The number to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. We've been talking about the budget, some of the recommendations that Donald Trump has made, the agencies and bureaucracies that he intends to defund or reduce funding to. Want to find out what you think about that, including the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, that's Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch and all that. How do you feel about that being defunded? Do you think it can and should stand on its own? How do you feel about the changes he's proposing in the welfare program, which, again, the same value will be given to those that apply for the benefits. It's just some will come in the form of actual food, staples that they can keep, pasta and beans and peanut butter and things like that. How do you feel about that? About half of the benefit coming in the form of actual, tangible food. What do you think about the other agencies that Donald Trump would eliminate or would reduce funding to? Legal Services Corporation, National Endowment for the Humanities and for the Arts. Do you agree with me that these are things do not need to be the government's business? This is for people that want to donate out of their own pockets to see these things happen. So that's what I feel. I want to know if you agree with me. And Donald Trump intending to reduce entitlement programs by $1.7 trillion over the next decade. How do you feel about that? Increase funding for the military, but decrease funding for entitlement programs. These are programs that the budget just grows kind of on autopilot every year. So, and what do you was it a surprise to you to find out that more money came into the federal treasury after the tax cuts went into effect? Because the Democrats and liberals, they holler and they scream. If you cut taxes, it's going to take government money away from the government. How are you going to pay for the tax cuts? That's what they always want to know. Well, what we're seeing is if it's handled right, these tax cuts will pay for themselves because of the additional revenue that they generate. And as we saw, the government had a $49 billion surplus last month. That's not going to happen again this year. I flat out guarantee you that. But there's one example of how the tax cuts already making a difference. Love to know what you think about all of that. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Number to call is 888-589-8840. Here's a school that's kind of fighting back. Everybody goes to school wearing Prayer Matters shirts. This members of Ohio community fighting back at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They got a complaint from 2 people alleging serious constitutional violations because they have prayer before athletic events, before sporting events, and apparently the school district yielded this, capitulated without firing a shot, and agreed to stop the practice of prayers. The students, the parents are striking back wearing T-shirts that say Prayer Matters. So we'll see what they do, if they will see about going to court, because the Freedom from Religion Foundation, they have discovered all they've got to do is spend 49 cents, and these school boards, 50, is it 50 cents?
Yeah, it's 50 now.
50.
They went up, yeah.
All they got to do is spend 50 cents, and these school boards, which are weak-kneed and weak-willed and weak-spined, will just roll over. They won't fire a shot. They won't even meekly protest. They just roll over, despite the fact that there are First Amendment law firms that will take these cases on pro bono. All right, let's go to Roger in Bismarck, Missouri, 888-589-8840. Roger, Bismarck, Missouri, what do you think? Talk to me.
Yes, sir. I'd like to talk about your food program there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't know how much food you plan on putting into these boxes, but I myself get food from a food bank. And what they put in my box is 1 quart of shelf milk, 2 cans of carrots, a can of pears, a bag of rice, a bag of spaghetti, and a can of peanut butter jar, and I get 1 box a month like that. Now, are they going to put a lot more in these boxes that you're talking about? They're going to supplement for food stamps?
Well, I'm guessing because it's about half of the value of whatever their monthly benefit is for those that get a benefit of more than $90 a month, which apparently is 80% of all food stamp recipients. So they will get at least half of the value of their food stamp benefit in food. So that would be, let's say if they're getting $90 a month, that would be $45 worth of food. Now, you can buy a lot of pasta and a lot of peanut butter and a lot of shelf-stable milk for $45. I think it'd be a pretty good size box that they would send people home. It sounds like it'd be considerable more than what your food bank is able to provide for those that take advantage of the food bank there. Any other questions or comments, Roger?
No, I was just wondering how big it was going to be and how they were going to consider packing it. That's all I really was worried about.
And I take it that food bank, I mean, you appreciate their work, and it's a genuine help to you and kind of helping you take care of your needs.
Yeah, a little bit it does, and I do appreciate it. I really do. It's just that the way they pack it, and for $45, I know you can buy a lot of your shelf-stable milk and a lot of peanut butter and all this, but you can't live on just that kind of stuff. So, with the prices of meat and eggs and things to this, is this really going to be an advantage to the people that's going to be put on this program?
Yeah. Well, and they will still have half of their benefit that they can spend on other food products, so their ability to make food choices is not going to be completely taken away from them. All right, Roger, appreciate the call. Let's grab a call from Mary in Commerce, Texas. Welcome, Mary. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
What the gentleman was just talking about, the USDA food box.
Yes.
I remember way back in the 60s, they didn't have food stamps. The people were given commodities, USDA commodities. And I tell you, we had friends who received them, and that canned meat from the USDA was delicious. I mean, it's not like you're getting you're getting good stuff. And I know the Indians, friends we have in Oklahoma, they could either get food stamps or get the Indian commodities, and their commodities were the best of the line. And,
all right. Well, that's good to hear, Mary. So, in other words, those that are going to take advantage of this may not necessarily suffer. People are thinking, well, there's going to be moth-eaten food and things like that. But Mary's experience, what she saw back in the day, was quality food and actually tasty. All right, Mary, thanks for the call. I appreciate that. Let's go to Wanda, Meridian, Mississippi. Wanda, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi. I was just calling in about the food subsidy, and I think it's a great idea. Here in Meridian, Mississippi, I see a lot of people going into stores with the EBT cards, and they'll purchase foods and turn around for different ones, and they get cash back.
Yeah.
And, I don't think that's right. I think they need to go on with boxes and, provide food for people, not for them to spend money, get the money and spend it foolishly.
Well, when you read a story, I appreciate the call, Wanda, and I understand exactly what you're saying. I read a story probably every week or every 2 weeks about a convenience store owner who is convicted or arrested for a giant case of fraud, bilking the government out of all kinds of money by fooling around with the food stamp programs. And what he does with those that turn in their food stamps to him and whatever, they got ways of finessing that so he can clear a whole bunch of money by taking advantage of the program. A lot of corruption, a lot of graft associated with this, and this definitely would cut down on it. And if the purpose of the food program is to make sure that people get food, then this is how you do it. All right, let's go to Deborah in Beebe, Arkansas. Deborah, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Brian. I just have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
On the radio several months ago, someone mentioned, not you specific, to call the White House to get rid of the Department of Education. So I've been doing that, and now I need to know, is that a good idea or not that you think of?
Well, it's an excellent idea. It's not going to happen under Donald Trump. He has hired Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, who's doing a great job, by the way. If you're going to have a Department of Education, Betsy DeVos is the type of person you want running the thing. She's a big-time advocate for school choice, so she's using her time in that position to encourage school choice, which we believe in. I believe in school choice, absolutely. I believe that education dollars should follow the student to the school of the parent's choice, whether that school is a religious school, whether it's a parochial school, whether it's a Catholic school, whether it's an evangelical school, whether it's a secular school. The money ought to follow the child to the school of the parent's choice. And she's an advocate for that, so that's good. She also, by the way, made a decision today, or announced it today, that they're no longer going to mess around with transgender complaints. So a student has a complaint about being asked to use a boys' restroom because they're a boy and they think they're a girl. The Department of Education is done messing with that. They're not going to get involved in that. They're not going to accept complaints about that because they are rightly making the point that the 1964 civil rights legislation forbids discrimination on the basis of sex, not on the basis of sexual orientation. So that's the meaning of the law, and that's the way they're going to apply it from now on. So there won't be any involvement of the Department of Education in all these trendy transgender cases, which is very, very good. And that's Betsy DeVos. That wouldn't have happened under a Hillary Clinton administration, I can flat out guarantee you. Bill in Gallion, Alabama. Bill, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian. If President Trump was going to cut some programs, he had to cut those on those programs for those refugee programs that they build a government for. That would really cut a lot out. Yeah.
Well, and it used to be when somebody would come to the United States as a refugee or as a migrant, they would have to have a sponsor. They would have to have somebody who would be responsible for their financial needs when they got here. I got a long email from a guy said, I brought a family member over. I had to sponsor them. This is back in the 60s or 70s. He had to commit himself to take care of that person so it did not become a ward of the state. American people are generous. They would take care of refugees. Well, that's it for the first hour. Focal Point American Family Radio. We will be right back. Craig in Oklahoma, hang on, and I'll take your call when we come out of the news break.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
At pray.afa.net, you'll find scripture-based prayers for every day of the year, written by American Family Association's very own Brian Fisher. These prayers will lead you in how to claim God's promises over your life and encourage you in ways to serve God every day. Visit pray.afa.net to read these prayers for yourself. That's pray.afa.net.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. The heads of the nation's intelligence agencies told the Senate Intelligence Committee that the threat from Russia is real and ongoing. Rachel Sutherland has more.
Committee Vice Chair Democrat Mark Warner asked Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates, who's in charge of making sure propaganda stays off social media.
There's no single agency, quote, in charge. There are several agencies throughout the federal government that have equities in this.
Democrats are expected to grill intelligence chiefs about the Russia probe, secret memos on alleged spying, as well as the security clearance process for White House staffers. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
A former police chief in Arkansas, already imprisoned, is now charged with rape. Eben Brown reports.
Investigators in Arkansas say they've matched DNA collected at the time a schoolteacher claimed she was raped back in 1997 to a man who once served as the local police chief. Grant Hardin was once the head of law enforcement in Gateway, Arkansas, near the Missouri line. Hardin is now charged with the assault, but they didn't need to look hard for him. Hardin is already in prison for murdering a city employee. He pleaded guilty last October and was sentenced to 30 years. Eben Brown, Fox News.
An immigration enforcement organization says American taxpayers would save millions of dollars a year if refugees are resettled close to home rather than brought to the United States. Chad Groening reports.
The Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR, has released a new study that reveals that refugees and asylum seekers in the U.S. cost federal taxpayers a staggering $1.8 billion per year and $8.8 billion over 5 years. And the study reveals that of the $1.8 billion, $867 million is tied up in welfare benefits that U.S. taxpayers pay. Ira Melman is a spokesman for FAIR. He says resettling refugees in the United States and other Western countries is just one means of protecting people.
In fact, it turns out to be the most expensive and least efficient way. It costs a lot of money to bring people to the United States, especially people who are fleeing their home countries, who may not be coming here with marketable skills.
And Melman says not every situation that forces people out of their homes results in them staying out of their homes permanently.
In many cases, the situations are rectified and people can go home. And we have to start distinguishing between the various circumstances that might be presented with us and recognize that any effort, no matter how noble and humanitarian, is subject to the limits of our resources and that those resources need to be allocated wisely.
Melman says the better alternative would be to provide temporary refuge and protection in or near people's homes with the goal of safely repatriating them. I'm Chad Groening.
New York's Attorney General is being taken to task for his efforts to punish and silence pro-life and Christian speech on public sidewalks.
New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman filed a federal lawsuit against 14 people that protested outside a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic. The Attorney General's lawsuit is based on the Federal Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act and similar New York laws, which were enacted to prevent actual violence and physical obstruction of abortion facility entrances. Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel says the people in question were peaceful and on a public sidewalk.
Our particular client is a pre-K teacher who spends his Saturdays on public sidewalks and public places around his area, sharing the gospel, including in front of the abortion clinic. But he's always on a public sidewalk, and he's always peaceful. The Attorney General knows this. The lawsuit's frivolous, but we are now in the midst of a 2-week trial for this injunction that the Attorney General is seeking, literally to silence pro-lifers and Christians. In fact, he said something that was absolutely unbelievable, especially coming from the state's top law enforcement officer. He says that in America, we cannot afford to allow people to have their own viewpoints. That's, in fact, exactly what the First Amendment protects, that we can have a specific viewpoint. And in this case, pro-life or Christian, those viewpoints are constitutionally protected, but not according to the Attorney General.
The New York Attorney General's office did not respond to AFN's request for comment. I'm Chris Woodward.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
The book of Revelation is the greatest manual for what it means to be an overcoming Christian you will ever find. If you want to be victorious and get in on the victory that Christ has already wrought at the cross, the book of Revelation outlines various steps for those who will overcome.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
They should have never shut down the government over DACA. We should have never held our American people and our military hostage.
In my judgment, it was the worst piece of legislation I have voted on since I've been in the United States Congress, and there's not another bill that's a close second.
There is a credible case of obstruction of justice against Donald Trump.
If you're serious about impeaching a president, it cannot and should not be done on a partisan basis.
The president has misled the American people about how big a problem chain migration is. I would rather see us focus on the millions of people that are legally waiting in line right now.
The Democratic leadership, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, really have no clear message. We have been confused. I think at the end of the day, they've been using us as pawns. But at this point, I'm quite frustrated with the Democratic leadership, what they've done.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. We're glad to have you in the conversation, no matter how you got here, live streaming us on Facebook, which you can do right now. Don't forget, we record the program as we stream it on Facebook. We upload the program in its entirety to our Facebook page, publish it with an extensive table of contents. You can find your way around. You might be listening on one of our 184 stations that comprise the American Family Radio Network. You may be listening to us using the apps for the iPhone or the Androids. You can listen on the go. You might be listening to us audio streaming at afr.net. Listen right on your computer. You might also be watching us or listening to us via a podcast. Tens of thousands of people every month use the podcast feature to follow us. So however you happen to be listening to us, we are very, very happy that you are in the conversation.
And don't forget the YouTube channel if people want to watch the program at their convenience.
Yes.
There you go.
Got the YouTube channel. Do we still have a link to that up on the Facebook page?
Yeah, we do, but I'll put a fresh one at top.
Okay, so we'll have a fresh link to the YouTube page. We're on the YouTube channel now, so you can catch the program that way.
Subscribe while you're there. That way it's easy to find.
Yeah, subscribe when you're there. And also, we are on a number of community television, Christian television network stations. This is ctnlifestyle.com. We're in Charleston, South Carolina, Cheyenne, Wyoming, Scottsbluff, Nebraska, Columbus, Georgia, Opelika, Alabama, Denver, Colorado, Fort Myers, Florida, Kingston, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, Mobile, Alabama, Pensacola, Florida, Fort Walton Beach, Florida. I know some of you in the Pensacola area are faithful viewers of the program. Quincy, Illinois, Hannibal, Missouri, Keokuk, Iowa, Tampa, Florida. I know we have some listeners down there or viewers down there. Tallahassee, Florida. Right here in Tupelo, our headquarters town. West Palm Beach also has the program. So a lot of different ways to access the program. We'll talk about another one at 2:15, just 7 minutes from now. Another way you can access the program. Now, I don't want to give anybody a misleading appraisal about this budget. The Donald Trump's own budget is a $4.4 trillion budget of expenditures. It only forecasts $3.4 trillion in revenue, so that's an anticipated deficit of almost $1 trillion. It's going to be the same in 2020. Then the projections are that the deficit will start to decline, but even after a decade, they're still going to be running pretty significant deficits. So it's never going to balance Trump's budget. So I want to be sure we're just complete in the information that I am giving you. Now, the ladies on The View were talking about Mike Pence the other day. This is clip R1. And Mike Pence was the representative of the United States government over in South Korea for the Olympics. And the star of the show over there was the sister of Kim Jong-un. She was like the Ivanka Trump of the Korea Peninsula. And everybody was just gaga over her, and everybody was just dumping all over Mike Pence. And
what is that? I mean, they have actual concentration camps there, but they're like, hey, she's got a nice smile.
Yeah, nice smile, so we're going to forget all about that, pretend it does not exist. And meanwhile, they've been really, really hard on Mike Pence, who, by all accounts, is one of the nicest people you would ever want to meet in your entire life. Now, here's an excerpt from the ladies on The View, and listen to their assessment of Mike Pence. This is a view that's shared by a lot of people on the left.
I went to law school in Indiana. He is a hated figure there, actually. He's not very popular at all. And I think when you have a Mike Pence that now sort of puts this religious veneer on things and calls people values voters, I think we're in a dangerous situation. Look, I'm Catholic. I'm a faithful person. But I don't know that I want my vice president speaking in tongues and having Jesus speak
like
to
I
him.
said before,
I don't know if I want that.
It's one thing to talk to Jesus. It's another thing when Jesus talks to you.
Exactly. Okay, well, that's different. That's different.
That's called mental illness, if I'm not correct.
But I'm
hearing voices.
All right, so Joy Behar, if you believe that Jesus speaks to you, then you are a mentally ill person. One of the other members of the panel accusing Mike Pence of speaking in tongues. He's a Baptist. They don't speak in tongues. I think he's a Baptist. They don't speak in tongues. So that's just inaccurate, that assessment of Mike Pence to begin with. But again, they look at conservative Christians as mentally ill people, mentally disturbed people. That's the way the left looks at us, and they probably will continue to look at us that way. Now, Mo Brooks, clip number 1, very conservative, member of the House Freedom Caucus. He's a conservative guy. He also ran for Senate in Alabama, was in the same primary field along with Roy Moore and the Republican that was the incumbent in that race. Now, here is Mo Brooks talking about his view of Donald Trump's budget.
Do I have reservations about busting through the spending caps last week in non-defense matters? Absolutely. I mean, here's where we proposed a budget last year, and we fought over it with the Democrats. The Democrats wanted a budget up here. The compromise was way up here. That's craziness. And yes, so I have reservations about that, and I have reservations about the threat that poses to the United States of America going forward. I have reservations about the impact that's going to have on the stock market. You've already seen a depressing effect there. I have reservations about escalating interest rates that are going to make it more costly to do business for people to buy homes. There are a lot of cascading effects to what was done last week. In my judgment, it was the worst piece of legislation I have voted on since I've been in the United States Congress, and there's not another bill that's a close second. That's how bad that debt junkie's dream bill was last week.
So a debt junkie's dream last week, according to Mo Brooks, the worst bill I've ever voted on in my tenure in Congress. So that's the view of a strong, unapologetic, fiscal conservative, Mo Brooks. Now, a lot of discussion about immigration in the wind and what's going to happen with that. Donald Trump's budget proposes $25 billion in an escrow account. We'll grab it, we'll bank it, we'll hang on to it so we can use it, draw down on it to build a wall. Now, here is Claire McCaskill, clip number 7. And it's interesting. The reason I want to play this clip for you, remember, the Democrats were criticizing Republicans for using the term chain migration. Remember that? Yeah. This is racist. This is terrible. Chain migration is a racist term. No respectable person would use the term chain migration because it's a reminder of the institution of slavery and the days when people were loaded up on slave ships and brought to America and unloaded off of these ships in chains. So chain migration is a bit of a reminder of all that. It's a horribly offensive and racist term. Okay, with that as a setup, here is Senator Claire McCaskill from Missouri.
As to family reunification, that gets a little more difficult depending on how far they want to go. The president has misled the American people about how big a problem chain migration is.
Oops.
I would rather see us focus on the millions of people that are legally waiting in line right now.
All right, Clara McCaskill, quite unapologetically, using the term chain migration, apparently not realizing what a closet racist she is on all of that. Americans, by the way, overwhelmingly support Donald Trump's common sense immigration reforms. 7 in 10, 72%, according to CBS, favor his framework that he detailed in the State of the Union address. We'll be right back. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Caiden Cowger will be my guest in the next segment. Stay with us.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
9 states and the District of Columbia are planning to resurrect the individual mandate and penalty at a state level. The 9 are California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Minnesota, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington State. No surprise, these states are liberal states. But many liberals were just as happy as conservatives when the penalty was zeroed out. Only 44% of Democrats supported keeping the mandate. Citizens in these states should go on the offense. They should begin Stop the Mandate campaigns on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. They should raise the roof. Don't wait. Start the battle even before the bills are written. This is one battle you don't want to lose.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining Medishare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. Medishare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join Medishare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. And I am your congenial, convivial, and amiable host, as always, Brian Fisher. The program Focal Point, the network, American Family Radio Network. Honored and pleased to welcome to our decision maker line a good friend of mine, Caiden Cowger. I've known Caiden for a number of years. Started chatting with Caiden a number of years ago. I think, Caiden, weren't you, when we started talking, weren't you kind of basically in junior high school? Or were you already in high school by then?
Yeah, I believe so. I think it was around 8th grade, something like that.
Yeah. And Caiden Cowger has a radio program called Cowger Nation. He's been doing talk radio since he was in the 8th grade. So got a big jump start on me. Kind of spooked Mark Levin when he met Mark Levin at the Values Voter Summit. Mark Levin just shook his head and said, man, they're making him younger every year now. So, all right, Caiden, well, one of the things I wanted to bring you on to talk about, by the way, just get us caught up on what you're doing in your life right now.
Well, one of the great things, we just transitioned to Liberty University, so I'm now going there. Another thing that we're getting up and started on doing is getting our Roku channel really amped up and getting great shows on like yours on our television channel and really creating a conservative alternative to watch on TV.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about in particular. You know, we've had our program up on the YouTube channel now. There's a lot of different ways to access this program, Focal Point. Caiden's come up with a new one. It's a Roku channel. Now, Roku is one of those little gizmos that you plug into one of the HDMI channels on your TV, and it serves as kind of a receiver or processor or conduit for certain broadcast channels. You can select channels. There's a channel store you can go to. It doesn't cost you anything to get the channel downloaded into your Roku device, but it opens up the possibility for you to get a lot of different programming right through the Roku channel. And so tell us, Caiden, a little bit about how this works as we get further into this, how people can find the Roku channel with Focal Point and your program on it.
Sure, yeah. Well, I jumped on this back in 2013, and that's when we first launched the channel. But it hasn't been until just recently, the last few years and few months, that Roku has really been taking off. And one of the things that's really important to point out about the Roku platform is that it is leading all of the markets in smart TVs. It's beating Apple TV and several other competitors. And what they're actually doing now, Brian, is that they're building it into television sets. So you don't actually have to plug it into your TV. It's just automatically a software that is installed. They created a deal with Sharp TV, with Insignia, Hisense, RCA, Philips TV, Element TV. They've all partnered with Roku, and they're actually building them internally into the television set. So as soon as you open up the box of your TV, Roku's already installed. Which it's really creating a new way to watch television, because this is becoming the main way in these specific TVs. It's becoming the main way to watch TV over cable. So this is really taking priority over cable. And on top of that, a lot of the numbers of cable are very quickly starting to decrease, and people are switching over to devices like Roku because it's free television, essentially. But the best way that you can watch it is if you get a Roku television or if you get a Roku player. What you can do is just go into the channel store and search Cowger Network, and then you can watch my show at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then you can listen to Brian's show or watch Brian's show at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
All right.
So that's a really efficient way.
So we're part of the prime time lineup, eh, Caiden, on the Cowger
You got it,
Network.
Brian.
So Cowger, that's spelled Cowger. And again, if you got a Roku device, when we bought our TV, it wasn't built in, but there was a Roku stick that came with the television. Just plug it in. So we've been using Roku ever since we got that television. So you can go to your Roku device. You can go to the channel store, look for Cowger Network, and just load that. Just choose that as the network that you want to have as part of your menu of options there. And you can watch Caiden's program at 8, and you can watch Focal Point at 9. All right, Caiden, and is this up and running now?
Yeah, everything's up and running. We've got everything going. So.
Okay. Well, that's terrific. Well, another way for viewers or listeners to access the program here at Focal Point, you can do it tonight. If you don't get a chance to hear the whole program today, 9 o'clock tonight, you can call up your Roku device on your smart TV, look for the Cowger Network on your channel store, channel finder, and boom, you're off and running.
I'll put that link on our Facebook page as well.
Okay, so we'll have that up there as well. All right, Caiden, well, listen, it's great to hear from you again, my friend. God bless you, and keep up the great work. It's good to hear from you. Thank you for the platform that you're providing for Focal Point and for our listening audience, another way to access the content. And I'm going to encourage people to tune in an hour early and catch your outstanding program. Caiden's been doing this now. He's going to be one of the all-stars in the talk radio world in short order. All right, Caiden, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Brian. Really appreciate it.
Okay,
God bless you, my friend.
God bless you. Caiden Cowger. Had a chance. Caiden just graduated high school last spring. Had a chance to see on tape. He delivered the graduation sermon at his church as a graduating senior. Did an outstanding job teaching the Word. I don't know whether he ought to be a talk show host. He's great at that, or whether he ought to think about going into the ministry, because he did an outstanding job opening the scriptures.
Amen.
Okay.
We always seem to run into him everywhere, don't we?
Yeah.
I mean, remember when we went to the Kim Davis event?
Yeah,
he was there. If
He
you
was
go
there.
to any of these kind of like CPAC or anything, Caiden's there.
Values Voter Summit and all that. By the way, speaking of CPAC, a good friend of mine, Brian Kamenker, is with an organization called Mass Resistance, one of the leading voices, pro-family voices, taking a stand against the radical homosexual movement. He applied to CPAC, was given a table to be an exhibitor there. They called him back and said, we're going to cancel your reservation. You can't come. You can't set up a table. at CPAC because we think you're just a little bit too inflammatory, a little bit too incendiary. Now, he's not inflammatory, he's not incendiary, but he tells the truth about the homosexual lifestyle. And one of the other sponsors at CPAC, one of the big moneyed sponsors, is the Log Cabin Republicans. They are ardently pro-homosexual, and they've been welcomed into the club there at this conservative event as a part of the Republican machine, and conservative voices taking a stand for the family and against sexual deviancy getting bounced right out of the hall. All right, let's grab a couple of sound bites here. Donald Trump has a very good, he supports a very good immigration bill that's actually sponsored by Tom Cotton. They've introduced it, and this is a bill that, let me see if I can find a description of it somewhere in my stack here. It's a bill that, it's not as good as the House bill, but if they can find a way to get these to conference and blend them together in one excellent bill, it would be a terrific idea. Now, what this bill would provide for, this is Chuck Grassley, the senator from Iowa, John Cornyn, senator from Texas, is it would grant immediate amnesty to 1.8 million illegal aliens. The House bill, the Goodlatte bill, only provides amnesty for the DACA recipients, which is what I prefer, but you got to support something that's going to pass. This bill, their bill, that would provide amnesty to 1.8 million. It would provide a $25 billion trust fund to build the border wall and improve overall border security. It would eliminate the visa lottery. This is it just randomly selects people from countries they believe are underrepresented and invites them to the United States regardless of their character, regardless of their education level, regardless of what kind of skills they might be able to bring to America. So it's a terrible program. This would eliminate the visa lottery, and it would halt new applications for chain migration. I'm sorry, that's a racist term. Pardon me. I apologize on my behalf and Claire McCaskill's behalf for using the correct term there. But one of the issues with the Grassley bill that I'm not fond of is everybody that's in the chain migration pipeline will be allowed to be processed. That's like 4 million people that's in the chain migration pipeline. It'll take 10 years to process everybody. It's going to let an untold number of additional immigrants into the country. I'm not crazy about that. That's part of the Grassley bill. I'm hoping that's something that could be weeded out of this thing when it goes to conference with the House, because the Goodlatte bill is a really terrific bill. It just gets rid of chain migration, just gets rid of the visa lottery. It also includes E-Verify, mandatory E-Verify in all places of business. Now, there's a dreamer who's not real happy with the Democrats and likes Donald Trump. He's a dreamer. And he's somebody that graduated from college. He's still a dreamer, but he likes Donald Trump's approach to immigration better than the Democrats. Let's listen, clip 8.
The Democratic leadership, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, really have no clear message, we have been confused. I think at the end of the day, they've been using us as pawns. The second point that I want to bring is that they should have never shut down the government over DACA. We should have never held our American people and our military hostage. There's plenty of time on the table to fix this. March 5th is the deadline, and you can see Republicans already willing to do something about it as we speak. And the last point that I want to say is that, look, Democrats, they own all three branches of the government back in 2008 to 2011, and they still chose to do anything. So at this point, I'm quite frustrated with the Democratic leadership, what they've done.
So he's an excited advocate and supporter of Donald Trump and his approach to the issue of immigration. So we'll see where these things go. Again, one of the huge sticking points is this foolish fake-a-buster where you got to get 60 votes in the Senate to get anything done. Terrible idea. Mitch McConnell continued to defend it along with a lot of other Republicans in the Senate. The Indian nations, the Tribal Nationals Policy Summit was just held on January 30th. So this is for all the Indian nations in the country to come together and have a national policy summit. You know who was conspicuously absent from this thing? Take a guess. Conspicuously absent. Pocahontas was missing. Elizabeth Warren, again, she's been hammered by the Cherokees because she cannot prove her Cherokee ancestry. In fact, it's an embarrassment to her, but what they discover when they're back in her ancestry, the only connection, the demonstrable connection that she has with the Cherokees is a member of her family line, one of her forefathers, rounded up Cherokees for the Trail of Tears. He was one of her ancestors. That's her sole connection to the Cherokee Nation back in 2.
Preborn is saving babies' lives.
My name is Omaris, and I was 19 when I found out I was pregnant. I felt that if I brought a child to this planet, that I could not take care of it, and I could not be mentally prepared to handle everything that comes with having a child. So I thought my best option was to have an abortion. And once I came to have my ultrasound and I heard his heartbeat, I could not have an abortion.
The Ministry of Preborn saves babies' lives through ultrasounds. When a mother hears her baby's heartbeat on an ultrasound, she'll choose life 80% of the time. To donate and provide for a free ultrasound to help save a baby's life, go to preborn.com or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
8 Days of Hope started after Hurricane Katrina, and we were blown away by the devastation that we saw on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi and down in New Orleans. And then this past year when we went to Houston, 8 Days of Hope, our rapid response team, we stayed for almost 7 weeks. We had never seen hundreds of thousands of families waiting for somebody to come and help them. And now you get a chance to be the hands and feet of Jesus. March 10th to March 24th, 8 Days of Hope is going to do its first ever back-to-back trip. 8 Days of Hope, 14 and 15. It's free. All you have to do is get to Houston. We provide the food and lodging, a couple great looking t-shirts. We're looking for skilled professionals, people who know how to work with their hands, and maybe they do this for a living. We're also looking for people that are less skilled, but are still looking to be a part of something way bigger than just themselves. Go to 8daysofhope.com for more information, 8daysofhope.com. Come be a part of the largest rebuilding trip ever planned by 8 Days of Hope. Go to 8daysofhope.com for more information, 8daysofhope.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
And welcome back to Focal Point. Again, a reminder, my program is on the Cowger Network on the Roku Network at 8 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to check it out, Abe Hamilton comes on right after Focal Point on the Cowger Network on Roku. So I encourage you to go there and check it out tonight. Now on the immigration front, I mentioned a couple of just some polling data that tells you where the American people are at. 72%, according to CBS, like the framework that Donald Trump laid out. Now remember, his framework is build a wall, get rid of chain migration, get rid of the visa lottery. That was his framework for immigration reform, and 72% of the American people like that. According to Harvard-Harris poll, 65% of voters approve a congressional deal that gives undocumented immigrants brought here by their parents work permits and a path to citizenship in exchange for increasing merit preference over preference for relatives, eliminating the diversity visa lottery, and funding barrier security on the U.S.-Mexico border. So they're willing to exchange giving undocumented immigrants that brought here by their parents, willing to give them path to citizenship in exchange for getting rid of these other things. No chain migration, no visa lottery, that kind of stuff. That's 62%, 65% of the American people support that. 68% of Hispanic voters support that. 65% of the general public, Hispanics support that by even greater numbers than the public at large. 64% of African American voters support it. 64% of Democratic voters. That's an interesting thing to see how many Democrats and Hispanics support these immigration reform proposals. 60% of voters do not believe that immigrants brought here by their parents, many of whom are in their 20s and 30s now, do not agree that they should be given preference for their parents, that their parents and relatives should be given preference in moving to this country. They'd like to restrict it to those, the immigrants themselves. 79% of voters think the immigration priority for coming to the U.S. should be the person's ability to contribute to America. So a merit-based immigration policy. That's 85% of African American voters. 72% of Democrats want a merit-based system of immigration. 68% of voters oppose the lottery. That's the random picking of 50,000 people for a visa. 62% of Democrats oppose that. 61% of Hispanics, 57% of African American voters oppose the visa lottery. Survey from America First Policy, 76% would support requirements that immigrants be able to support themselves financially. 66% of Democrats support that. Nearly 6 in 10 voters would support a proposal limiting family-based immigration to immediate family. So in other words, the bottom line is there's considerable support, 60 to 70% and higher, for all of these immigration proposals, very popular with the American people, including Hispanics and Democrats. Now, Jeff Sessions and the Department of Justice getting after it. They're going to enforcing the law at apartment complexes. Amnesty advocates are all upset about this, but the Department of Justice and ICE is making it clear, look, we're not doing immigration sweeps here. These are all targeted enforcement. In other words, we go where we have reason to believe an identified illegal immigrant lives. So we go looking for that person. If we run across another illegal immigrant in the process, we will deal with them. We may process them, but we are not doing these random sweeps. This is targeted enforcement. They're not conducting checkpoints. They're not targeting aliens for indiscriminate raids. So they're very targeted in their enforcement, but they're going to businesses and they're going into apartment complexes. Now, one of the considerations that Donald Trump is thinking about is putting a citizenship question on the 2020 census, which I think is absolutely appropriate. Now, the census just calls for a head count. That's everybody living in the United States. So they would want to keep a head count of illegal aliens that are in this country. But by asking the question about whether they're citizens or not, we'd get an idea of what percentage of our population are entitled to live in this country. What percent are legal immigrants? I think this is a great question, but amnesty advocates, they're up in arms over this. The Attorney General of the state of California, Javier Becerra, says he puts a question like that about citizenship, he is going to sue the Department of Justice, sue ICE, because they say, look, this is a census that's conducted regardless of censorship, regardless of citizenship, but you can do both. You can take a head count plus asking the question about citizenship. It's not an either-or kind of decision. Now, California employers are in a bit of a bind because their government is warning them, Javier Becerra is warning them, look, if you cooperate with immigration and customs law enforcement, you can get fined 10 grand. And we're watching. We're looking out for people that disregard California law and cooperate with immigration authorities. We'll slap you with a fine of up to 10 grand. So the business owners in California getting squeezed between the California government and between the federal government and the federal law against illegal immigration. By the way, one of the issues that's going to come up in the campaigns already surfaced is Louis Farrakhan, because Keith Ellison, remember, he's the Muslim that represents Minnesota in Congress. It turns out he just recently, with 3 other Democrats, attended a private event with Farrakhan. He is a notorious anti-Semitic Muslim who describes Jews as satanic. So they either went to this private event with him or they publicly expressed their support. That includes Keith Ellison. It includes New York Representative Gregory Meeks and Indiana Representative Andre Carson, who all attended that dinner. So Keith Ellison has been trying to distance himself from Louis Farrakhan. He doesn't want people to know that he went to this private reception. It was just him, a small group of people, and Louis Farrakhan, but he's going to have to answer for that in the campaign, as well he should. All right, let's get to some FBI questions on this whole FISA business. Sid Blumenthal, clip number 2, he's the Democrat, and again, the Democrats just will not let go of this obstruction of justice possibility. There's no way to make it happen under our laws, but they're not giving up. Here's Sid Blumenthal wanting to impeach Donald Trump for obstruction of justice.
There is a credible case of obstruction of justice against Donald Trump. His refusal to release this memo, as well as his blanket release of the Nunes memo without even having read it or making the decision before he read it, is more evidence of obstruction of justice. It does go to corrupt intent, which is one of the 2 essential elements in any charge of obstruction, the other being interference with a lawful investigation. It goes to motive and intent.
And we've played sound bites from Alan Dershowitz saying, look, there's no obstruction of justice here. If Donald Trump does something that he's constitutionally empowered to do, like fire the head of the FBI, that's entirely his decision. He doesn't have to justify it. He doesn't have to explain it. He doesn't have to account for it. He doesn't have to answer for it to anybody. He has the right to hire and fire people to work in the executive branch of government. So you can't get him on an obstruction of justice card because he fired James Comey. He's entitled constitutionally to do it. You cannot make the exercise of a constitutional power an impeachable offense. Now here's a Gerald Nadler, clip number 3. Here's a counterpoint to Sid Blumenthal. Here's the Democrat, says not so fast on this whole impeachment train.
There's one other thing which I should make very clear. If you're going to impeach, if you're serious about impeaching a president, it cannot and should not be done on a partisan basis. You have to have, at least by the end of the process, buy-in from the Republicans, or at least a good number of Republicans, for 2 reasons. Number one, for arithmetic, you can impeach a president on a majority vote, but to convict him in the Senate requires 2/3 vote, which means you need votes from the Republicans. But second, and more importantly, if you're really serious about removing a president from office for high crimes and misdemeanors, you shouldn't do that unless you get at least an appreciable fraction of the people who voted for him, of the other side, to agree, reluctantly perhaps, but to agree, you had to do it, because otherwise you'll have 20 years of recriminations. We won the election, you stole it from us. You don't want to divide the country that way. If evidence arises that is of sufficient gravity to justify an impeachment and of sufficient persuasiveness to persuade people, including by the end of the process at least, some of the people who voted on the other side, then you consider an impeachment, but not before.
And there is just no possible way that's going to happen, barring something radically unforeseen. You're not going to get a buy-in from the people that voted for Donald Trump. They're still fans of his. You're not going to get a buy-in from enough senators to vote to convict. You're not going to get enough buy-in from enough members of the House of Representatives even to impeach him. Just not going to happen. It's just a complete dream. It's a fantasy on the part of Democrats. Now, I've got 3 clips here. We'll get to one here to begin with. Everything you needed to know about this FISA warrant business here is, now there's a music bed underneath this, so you may get distracted by that, but that's just the way the source clip came. This is clip number 4, features Trey Gowdy and a news clip.
This dossier was paid for by the Democrat National Committee and Hillary Clinton. They hired a political opposition research firm who hired Christopher Steele, who wrote it. See how easy and straightforward that is? It tells you the source with clarity and specificity. Now contrast that with the way it was presented to the court. For reasons the Democrats can never explain, the FISA application went to great lengths to avoid identifying a material point about the financial source behind the dossier.
Neither the initial FISA application in October 2016 nor any of the renewals disclose or reference the role of the DNC, Clinton campaign, or any party campaign in funding Steele's effort.
All right, so what Trey Gowdy and the news account they're talking about is the amount of information that was withheld from the FISA court. They never told the FISA court that Hillary Clinton paid for this, that it was campaign propaganda, it was opposition research from a campaign. Never told them that it was funded by Hillary Clinton or the Democratic National Committee, and they never told them that their chief informant, Christopher Steele, the guy that wrote this thing and produced it, was fired by the FBI as somebody they considered unreliable. And remember, he's the source of this thing, so his reliability is the key to the whole ball of wax. We'll be right back with your phone call. Stay with us.
Your family is on a crazy cycle of disrespect and defiance. Next time on Focus on the Family, Dr. Emerson Eggerich provides insight on how you can stop that crazy cycle that spins in your family by demonstrating a little love and respect. It's wisdom that brings peace on the next Focus on the Family with Jim Daly.
Focus on the Family is heard each weekday morning at 5 o'clock Central on American Family Radio.
Jeremiah 20 verse 9 says, "His word was in my heart like a burning fire." Hi, this is Alex McFarland, co-host of Exploring the Word. You know, I was in my second year of college as a new believer when God put in my heart an insatiable desire to read His Word. And that daily reading of God's Word has shaped who I am. And every day on Exploring the Word, Bert Harper and I teach the Word so that fire and love for Scripture will be in your heart as well.
Exploring the Word, weekday afternoons at 3 Central on American Family Radio.
We've always had an interest. God has given us a gift of being able to help a lot of people with their finances and budgets and stuff.
AFA supporters Bernie and Alice Larson met Dan Celia at a Faith, Family, and Finance town hall meeting.
And he answered some questions, and we were thinking about the charitable gift annuities, and we'd never heard of that before, but we thought, well, we'd always wanted to leave some of our money for God, but we didn't know where or how, and we felt like this was put into our laps as answer to our prayers as to what we could do after we're gone.
Bernie and Alice learned a charitable gift annuity from the AFA Foundation would provide them with a monthly income for life, as well as supporting the American Family Association into the future. You can learn more about charitable gift annuities and other financial products at afafoundation.net or call 800-326-4543, extension 345.
And you just can't outgive God.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Hi, welcome back to the last segment of today's Focal Point program. Number to call if you want to join our conversation is 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. 888-589-8840. Talk about anything that we've talked about today. While you're calling in, a couple of quick sound bites to wedge in. This is another clip on the FISA warrant. And again, I mentioned the things they did not tell the FISA court about, the judge about, that the judges would have wanted to know was that they'd had to fire Christopher Steele because he was unreliable. Promised he wouldn't talk to the media. First thing he did is go out and start blabbing confidential information to the media. So they had to fire him. The FISA court never found out about that. They reapproved his surveillance warrant 4 times. One of the guys that approved it, the last guy to approve it, was Rod Rosenstein, who knew that he'd been fired by the FBI because of unreliability, and yet he still went to the FISA court and reauthorized their surveillance and realized that the FISA court did not know anything about Christopher Steele's sources. None of them are named. He wasn't ever asked to divulge them. Nobody knows anything about his sources. But remember, it's their credibility is the key to the dossier. It's not Christopher Steele's credibility because he didn't witness any of the stuff that's in the dossier. He's relying entirely on testimony or contributions from people that he talked to. So their credibility, whether they're reliable, I mean, that's the kernel of the whole thing. in his dossier, nobody has any idea who these people are. So there's no way even to assess whether they are credible. And we know that Christopher Steele turned out not to be credible, not to be trustworthy, because they had to fire him. So here is clip number 5.
The Democrats claimed Chris Steele was a reliable source, but he wound up being dismissed as a source by the FBI for 2 different reasons. And in addition to that, Steele's reliability isn't the seminal issue. He didn't know the facts firsthand. He repeated what sources in Russia were telling him. So for that matter, a parrot could have been the source. If all you're going to do is repeat back what nameless, faceless people in another country are telling you, your experience and expertise aren't nearly as important as the reliability of the people you're listening to.
The DOJ and FBI had 4 opportunities to disclose these facts in the original FISA application and in each of the 3 subsequent renewal applications over nearly a year-long period, but never did.
So that's information the FISA court never had in making a decision whether to reauthorize the warrant. Here is clip number 6, where again the FISA court was not told about the nauseating bias in Christopher Steele or in Peter Strzok or Lisa Page. Let's listen.
Every single Republican on the House Intelligence Committee voted to release the Democrat memo. Every single one. On the other hand, not a single solitary Democrat voted to release the Republican memo. Not a single one. The lead Democrat most responsible for the drafting of the Democrat memo is Representative Adam Schiff. Representative Schiff didn't have much interest in finding out how much of the dossier was used, whether it was vetted before it was used, whether it was vetted, for that matter, after it was used, or who paid for it. Keep in mind, they went to court to keep you from finding out who paid for the dossier.
The American people will learn that the Democrats' memo attacks Republicans for questioning the integrity of DOJ lawyers like Bruce Orr and FBI agents like Peter Strzok, who have been either demoted or removed. The Democrats' memo also defends the integrity of Christopher Steele as a reliable and credible source, even though the FBI and Department of Justice terminated him.
In September 2016, Christopher Steele admitted to Justice Department official Bruce Orr his feelings against then-candidate Trump when Steele said he, quote, was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president.
And again, that's something the FISA court never heard, that he was desperate to keep Donald Trump from being elected and he was passionate about that enterprise. They never heard that, the FISA court did, about the guy who was responsible for all of the content in the dossier that was the basis for extending the surveillance warrant. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let's go to David in Princeton, West Virginia. David, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Brian, I was thinking about these illegal immigrants. If they are given citizenship, then the only way the Republican Party could ever hope to win anything would be to get in a massive handout war with the Democratic Party. And who's going to pay for it but the American taxpayers? And I think, personally, that would just totally ruin this country.
Yeah,
and
it would.
The businesses that we are fortunate enough to get back from overseas, they will reform the recent tax reform, and when we lose them again, we'll never get them back.
Yeah. Well, you're right, David. It would destroy this country as it exists, and it would destroy the Republican Party. It would destroy any chance of having any kind of conservative principles or conservative values included in our public policy. Those days would be gone. They would be over. There's no way the Republicans are going to win a shootout with the Democrats. You can't defeat Santa Claus in an election because he's always going to offer more goodies than you can because you got a conscience that checks you at some point. The liberals on the other side, progressives, don't have anything that stops them from promising them the moon, promising them stuff that nobody can afford. There's no way they could win. So there's a lot at risk. There's a lot at stake with what happens to these illegal aliens. I mean, the Democrats have even said, they've got a memo they circulated among themselves that said getting these dreamers legalized is the key to our political future. It's the key to our political future because they realize that their stock is dropping with the electorate in general, so they've got to get new people that come into this country and feel indebted to the Democrats. So they will vote Democrat. That's the only hope they've got for electoral success in the future. Let's go to Gregory in Heston, Kansas. Gregory, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi, long-time listener, AFR's
helped me a lot mature in my faith. I appreciate it.
Great, you're welcome. Glad to hear it.
On the I was the first hour of the show, I'd heard you had mentioned that when someone sponsors an immigrant coming from a different country, they have to sign paperwork so that they would sponsor them personally and financially.
That used to be the way it was, anyway.
Yeah, my wife and I went through the process legally. She's a permanent resident getting ready to apply for citizenship. And I had to sign paperwork so that I would sponsor her. She's not eligible for WIC programs or anything like that. So I suppose some people get away with it, some people don't. I'm not really sure.
But in other words, you had to sign documents that you would accept responsibility for her welfare, for her financial support, that she would not become a ward of the state, that you would take care of her as an immigrant to this country.
Yes, I would.
Yeah. Well, and that used to be, and when was that? How long ago was that happened?
Probably 3 years ago.
Oh, just 3 years ago. So the sponsorship was still a requirement just 3 years ago. All right. Well, that's good to know. I thought maybe that had gone completely by the boards. All right, Greg, listen, I really appreciate that. So here's a man who had to sponsor his own wife, which, of course, is perfectly appropriate. But that gives you an idea. It was part of the immigration system at that point. If you wanted to bring somebody to this country, that's fine. You can do it legally and all that kind of thing, but you will have to accept responsibility for that person so they do not become dependent on the welfare program. All right, great, Greg. We thank you for the call. Very informative. Let's go to James in Kokomo, Indiana. James, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Hey, I just wanted, we're always talking about who's funding the dossier. Well, and we always say maybe with some Republicans that were never Trumpers too. Have you ever heard of the guy named Paul Singer who's, donating to Rubio and Paul Ryan and all these guys about him funding the dossier originally before the Democrats kind of took over and they kind of worked together?
Well, I know there was a conservative group that funded the initial research. I didn't realize it was Paul Singer's money. Maybe I'd forgotten that little detail. So he was involved. This is the guy that's some of the money behind Marco Rubio, who's basically an open borders guy. All right, well, that's interesting information. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I just wanted his name out there so we can look into what he's doing and, his vulture capitalism around the world and how he's getting his money, too,
All right, James. And, Paul Singer's the guy you got to keep an eye on. He's a big-time supporter of the homosexual movement among conservatives, so-called conservatives among the Republican Party. All right, James, great call. Let's go to Art in Midland, Texas. Art, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Thanks, Brian. I wanted to raise the issue of something that I haven't heard anyone talk about, and that's Eric Holder. You remember Holder used to refer to himself as Obama's wingman.
Yeah.
And now with the email that came up today, it talks about Obama's someone backdating an email saying, we want to do everything by the book. When Eric Holder left, he went back to Covington, a white shoe law firm in D.C. And around the same time, 14 attorneys left DOJ, which was extremely rare. Because you'd have a turnover of a couple people in the summer, but never a big slug like that. So my question is, where's Holder fit in this? He's the guy that sometimes he talks about he wants to run for president. Remember, he's the one that got the retainer from the state of California for $70,000 a month to fight Trump on
I think it was on immigration.
Dreamers, et cetera. Anyway, so I don't want Holder to fall off the grid.
Yeah.
Let's find out what he's been doing.
That's a good point. And no, he's sticking his head above water lately. He's become sort of part of the landscape now. So we got to keep an eye on Eric Holder. And again, he's a bad actor. He's the Fast and Furious guy. So he's got a lot of issues he's got to be held accountable for. All right, thanks, Art. Last call of the day. Let's go to Robert in Pea Ridge, Arkansas. Robert, got 25 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
Yes, there's a Democratic memo that they tried to indicate that it was classified information, which nobody come out and railed against it, saying it is classified. I think this is their whole point. I mean, they don't want the memo to come out. The Republicans have pushed for it to come out. This is all they wanted.
Yeah. I think you're right, Robert. There was just a delaying tactic on the part of the Democrats. They never wanted that memo to see the light of day. Republicans are the ones that are interested in full transparency. That's it for today. God bless you. See you back here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Teaching art to children is fun and easy with DVD collections by artist Barry Stebbing. Learn the fundamentals of painting and drawing with a teacher-friendly curriculum.
It looks kind of like a beautiful sunset sky. See all those colors coming off your brush?
Art is a wonderful pastime enjoyed by all ages. Start your DVD collection by Barry Stebbing at afastore.net.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.